Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back to our Hanafi fiqh class. We are doing the kitab known as I'ala Sunan of Mulana Zafar Ahmad Thanvi rahimahullah. And last week we had entered into the chapter regarding the leftovers of donkeys and the meat of donkeys and so on and so forth. And that's where we are continuing on from tonight, inshallah ta'ala. So without any delays, let's begin. Bismillah walhamdulillahi wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillahi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. So we had completed hadith number 269 last week, and tonight inshallah we're starting from hadith number 270. عن أنس بن مالك رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم جاءه جاء فقال أكلت الحمر فأمر مناديا فنادى في الناس أن الله ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم ينهاكم عن لحوم الحمر الأهلية فإنها رجس فكلئت القدور وإنها لتفور باللحم أخرجه البخاري أيضا. So, like in the previous hadith over here, where the prohibition of domesticated donkeys was mentioned, we're carrying on from the same point here. So Hazrat Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, he said that ja'ahu ja'in, meaning a person came to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, faqala, and he said, ukilatil humuru, that ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the donkeys are being eaten, because this was now after the battle of Khaybar had just taken place, and there were donkeys that the Jews had. So the Sahaba radiyallahu anhu being hungry, and it was time to eat and everything. So prior to this, there was no ruling with regards to donkeys and other different things as well. But anyway, so they slaughtered some donkeys like you would slaughter sheep and cut it up. So the donkeys were slaughtered and they cut the meat up already and they put it in the pots and it was already cooking. So فَقَالَ أُكِلَتِ الْحُمُرِ, that the donkeys are being eaten. And this was also, as you'll find in the books of Tariq and Sirah and stuff like this here, before what was the reason behind the prohibition and all these sort of stuff. But anyway, that's for another time. But anyway, so Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam commanded a munadi, a person to go out and call and proclaim amongst the people, Anna Allah wa Rasulahu yanhaakum, that Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam yanhaakum or yanhayakum, as another narration mentions, that Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alayhi wasallam prohibits you from luhumil humur al-ahliya, from eating the meat of domesticated donkeys, fa innaha rijisun, because it is filthy. So from this narration over here, it's a bit on a slightly different note, because it states that it is filth. So, you know, إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان. So you got the same rijs being spoken about, and rijs is not exactly a term of endearment. When you say something is filth, it means it's of the worst evil kind. So you will find this narration also with other words where rijs is not mentioned, and different interpretations as to what exactly it means in this context. But nonetheless, so you are prohibited from eating domesticated donkeys because it is filth. So does this mean that the saliva of donkeys and stuff is filthy like that of a pig and a dog? The answer is not quite. Remember, we did this last week, which was that they fall into the category, a special category of themselves, which is known as mashkuk. But nonetheless, mashkuk means like doubtful. But at the end of the day, from a practical perspective, it means if you have anything where a donkey has licked out from, or if you happen to be feeding the donkeys and they lick you, then you should wash your hands, or wherever they happen to be licking you anyway. So that's but anyway, coming back to the hadith. So فَكُلِئَتِ الْقُدُورِ, so the pots were poured out. وَإِنَّهَا لَتَفُورُ بِاللَّحْمِ, while at this time the pots were actually filled. You know, the meat was actually cooked now in the pot. That's how long the meat was cooking in the pots. And then the command came, it's haram, it's prohibited, and they poured it out. Just like when the command came that wine has been made haram, the streets of Medina ran with the wine as the Sahaba radiallahu anhum poured it all just out into the street. But anyway, so nonetheless, the Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is the narrator of this hadith as well. So let's move on further before we complete this chapter with regards to all donkeys. So we've still got a handful of ahadith left to go. So hadith number 271 عن سلمة بن الأكوع رضي الله عنه قال خرجنا مع النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يوم خيبر فذكر حديثا طويلا وفيه فلما أمسى الناس مساء اليوم الذي فتحت عليهم أوقدوا نيرانا كثيرا. Hazrat Salama ibn al-Akwa radiallahu anhu is the narrator of this hadith. He says that we went out with Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam on the day of Khaybar. Now, this is now after the battle and everything had taken place, and فذكر حديثا طويلا. So the whole part of the hadith is being cut out, and we're coming to a specific portion of the hadith. So in this narration, it mentions Hazrat Salama radiallahu anhu. He mentions that فلما أمسى الناس, when evening came, مساء اليوم الذي فتحت عليهم, the night of the battle after the Jews of Khaybar were defeated, then أوقدوا نيرانا كثيرة. The Sahaba radiallahu anhu, they made many big fires because the battle was over, there was lots of booty, there was things to eat and stuff, and there were pots and everything. So hey, not exactly quite the same thing as saying having a party, but there was something to eat. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhu were busy making something to eat. So they made many fires. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم على أي شيء يوقدون. So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked that what are they, أوقد يوقد means to stoke. So it doesn't mean what fuel are they using for the fire, which is, if you didn't understand the hadith correctly, that's what you would be thinking. Okay, well, they're using wood, or no, they're using leaves. That is what وَقُودُهَا النَّاسُ وَالْحِجَارَةِ, like you find in the ayah of the Quran, where the fuel for Jahannam is men and stone. So it's the same word being used here. But here, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is not asking about what fuel they are using. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is asking what is in the pots that they are busy putting these fires on for. So قالوا على لحم. So the Sahaba radiallahu anhum said they putting it on for meat. قال على أي لحم. قالوا لحم الحمر الإنسية. So the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked, what meat? You're saying meat, but what meat? So they said the meat of domesticated donkeys. فقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أهريقوها واكسروها. فقال رجل يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أو نهريقها ونغسلها. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam told this Sahabi, tell them to pour it out and to break the pots. So a man from the Sahaba radiallahu anhu, he said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, is it possible that we can pour it out and wash the pots? And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, qala aw dhaka. Well, that also, it's fine. So from this hadith over here, it was the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, by and large, were poor. Poverty was the order of the day during the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As you could see from the fact that Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam wore 2 stones around the stomach of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Sahaba like Hazrat Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu used to faint frequently out of hunger. That's how bad it was. So you may think, but Sahaba like Hazrat Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, Hazrat Uthman radiyallahu anhu, others were like multi-millionaires, yes. But this was at the time when Islam was in its beginning stages, and the money was being spent for the growth of Islam itself, for the preservation, for the weapons and everything had to be bought, and mounts and this, and a million and one things for the upkeep and the growth of Islam as a whole. So there was no fanciful things, among other reasons. But anyway, so the point being, what I'm mentioning, at least over here, that the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they were saying, in other words, we don't exactly all have pots. And these are like some good pots these Jews have. In today's world, the women all want AMC pots. If you have an AMC pot, you're like a rich person. So anyway, these are AMC pots. Can we wash them out? So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, oh, you can do that also. In other words, you don't have to break the pot now. It was the command of breaking it was to show the extent of how prohibited is the meat of domesticated donkeys. So when the Sahabi asked, is it possible that we can throw that haram meat away, but can we wash it out now and then use it? So Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, you can do that too. In other words, also what you understand from this is that if it was najis, if it was haram and stuff like this here. It suffices for you to wash it for it to become permissible. So maybe, for example, you buy a house from someone, for example, and now maybe there's glasses, or there's cups, or there's plates, etc., etc. So you have these sort of things. Do you know what they ate in it? No, you don't. Is it likely they ate haram in it? Most likely. They may have used that glass for beer, they may have used that plate for bacon, etc., and so on and so forth. So do you need to go and smash it all? If you happen to have that sort of money, I mean, nobody's going to stop you. But from a Shari'i perspective, if you just took it and you washed it properly, then it would be sufficient. Obviously, what I will state over here as well is that there's a distinction to be made between stuff which are specific for haram stuff. Now, you find a narration with regards to certain alcoholic things which Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam prohibited. And hintami and things of the sort. Because let me scroll back a little bit. What I'm referring to here is that there were certain alcoholic drinks that the Arabs used to make. They used to use, for example, let's take it away. They would take like a pumpkin and dish the inside out, and they would use that container when they would that pumpkin used to become a container. They would throw some things in, and which would become part of the fermentation process for alcohol. So when the prohibition of alcohol came about now, so they wanted to continue using these things that was out. Why? Because it resembles that sort of thing, and the possibility it may even continue the fermentation. So that's in its place. Extending on from that point is now, if you have a point I've spoken about in the past, the imitation of haram. You have, for example, grape juice in a champagne-looking bottle. This is something which is not permissible from a Shari'i perspective. You have bacon, which is supposed to be, or as it's called in the UK, halal beef bacon. People want so to imitate haram that they call things by the same name even. Halal beef bacon as opposed to pig bacon now. But anyway, nonetheless, that's a prohibited thing in and of its own self. But anyway, if I speak on that topic, we'll never end up finishing the chapter. So let's move on. So anyway, so Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, oh, dhaka, you can do that too. That's okay. You can wash the pots out. You don't have to break it. Rawahu al-Bukhari. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is in the rate of that hadith as well. Let's move on to the next one. Hadith number 272. عن معاذ رضي الله عنه قال كنت ردف النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم على حمار يقال له يعفور. الحديث رواه البخاري. Hazrat Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu, he says that I was the ridf. A radif means the person who sits behind you on an animal. Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas, Hazrat Fadl ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, and others, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam often used to ride, for example, going somewhere and have a sahabi sitting behind. So think of it riding on a motorbike, and there's a passenger sitting behind you. So that's a radif. So Hazrat Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he was sitting on the animal with Nabi, on a donkey with Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and that donkey of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam had a name. Its name was Ya'fur. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah narrates this hadith. Now, I don't think I wrote on this topic. I wrote on the swords and the armor and the bow and the shield and those sort of stuff. At least I think of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you'll find names of the camel of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the donkey of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam and so on. Everything basically had names. But okay, we're not going to get into the fiqh of naming things also. But nonetheless, it is a sunnah to name stuff. So if you happen to have a car, you name your car. Call it Quicksilver and Lightning and whatever you want to call it. You want to name your cat, name your cat. You would actually, let's put it this way. Some people, you plan on calling your cat a name anyway. Some people think, okay, it's a car. But if you name your car, let's say, for example, you call it White Lightning, for example, because it happens to be white and fast. So you call it White Lightning with the intention that you want to follow the sunnah. Then you gave your car a name and you get reward for it at the same time. But anyway, so that was that hadith. So what's the purpose of this hadith? Here from this hadith, it shows that a donkey is a creature that is used for transport. You can ride on it. It's clean in that sense. So it's not like, oh, I touched the donkey. Like some people have this in their mind. If you touch a dog's fur, you must go and bath. This is not part of Islam. What is impure is the saliva of the dog. So if the dog licks you or you touch his saliva because it's on a place that he licked, then you must wash your hand for that reason. But the fur of the dog that's dry over there, it's pelt. If the dog happened to have been skinned because it ended up in China and somebody had him for supper, that pelt, that fur of it over there, it's not automatically impure in that sense. Be that as it may, so we understand from this hadith that the donkey has its purpose. You ride on the donkey and stuff like this here, but you don't eat him. So let's move on to the next hadith, hadith number 273. عن أسامة بن زيد رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ركب على حمار على إكاف عليه قطيفة وأردف أسامة وراءه رضي الله عنه رواه البخاري. So the next hadith is on a similar note. Hazrat Usama ibn Zayd radiyallahu anhu, the son of Hazrat Zayd ibn Haritha radiyallahu anhu. Hazrat Usama, very beloved to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam rode one day on a donkey, ala himarin, and the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam had put Hazrat Usama radiyallahu anhu as his radif, like we just did above. Where am I? Oh, okay. Must the thing. So anyway, so Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam put Hazrat Usama radiyallahu anhu behind him on the donkey. Once again, this hadith is coming to simply put out to us that if you touch your donkey, if you're cleaning him or whatever like this here, the donkey is clean. If you sit on your donkey is clean. It's not, I must go and wash the clothes because it came in contact with the donkey. No. So you make use of your donkey in that manner. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is the narrator of that hadith as well. We've got two hadith left, I think, for the end of the chapter. So let's move on before our time runs out. Hadith number 274. عن البراء رضي الله عنه في قصة حنين والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم على بغلة بيضاء وعلى بغلته البيضاء وأبو سفيان بن الحارث آخذا بلجامها والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول أنا النبي لا كذب أنا ابن عبد المطلب. رواه البخاري. Hazrat Bara radiyallahu anhu, he narrates in the story of the Battle of Hunain, part of the hadith. Now he is not quoting the entire hadith over here, he's quoting just a selected portion. He says, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was riding on his baghl. A baghla is a female mule. So you have a donkey and you have a mule. So mules and donkeys are in the same category. They are both like domesticated things. A mule obviously is a mix, but nonetheless, so Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam's mule's name was Bayda. So we had the donkey whose name was Ya'fur and the mule's name was Bayda. And then you'll find the camel which had its own name and so on and so forth. That's why I say, you plan on having a ginger cat and you're calling him Biscuit, so be it. Call him Biscuit with the intention that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam named his animals, so I will name my ones as well. I mean, how many people don't have cats? How many people don't have other pets, whatever it may be? So you get the chance to do the same thing which you are doing and yet get a reward for it at the same time. Because you say, I'm doing this for the sake of the sunnah, not just because I need a name to call my cat by. Anyway, so he says that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was riding on this mule whose name was Bayda, and Hazrat Abu Sufyan ibn al-Harith radiyallahu anhu, he was holding the lijam. Lijam means the reins. He was holding the reins of the mule. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was saying, Ana an-nabiyyu la kadhib, ana ibn Abd al-Muttalib. This was literally translated, I am a Nabi and this is not a lie. I am the Nabi and this is not a lie. I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. Two things to point out over here. Number one, if you will hear the way it goes, Ana nabiyyu la kadhib, Ana ibn Abdul Muttalib. It's actually a poem, if you look at it in the sense. So we know Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was not a sha'ir, was not a poet. It was prohibited for Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam to write poetry. So does this count as poetry? The answer is no. This was the sum total. It's like, I'm a poet and I didn't know it. That sort of thing. That's not exactly a poem. So from this angle, poetry from a Shari'i perspective is, when you talk about the mu'allaqat of those people and you talk about these big lengthy poems. Sometimes they were short, sometimes they were lengthy, but those are the type of things which are deemed as being poetry. Not this, it does not meet the requirements to be deemed as being poetry per se. So a line, one line doesn't count as poetry. If it was 4 lines, the full Buhur, Bahri Kamil, Bahru Ramal, whatever, then you can say, yeah, sure, it was poetry. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam liked poetry, like the poetry of Hadrat Abdullah ibn Rawaha radiallahu anhu, and many other Sahaba as well. So this hadith doesn't count as being poetry in the true sense. Hence, it doesn't contradict the Quran, where Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was prohibited and prevented and made unable to write poetry in that sense. So that's number one. Number two is when Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, I am the son of Abdul Muttalib. We know Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is the son of Abdullah, who's the son of Abdul Muttalib. So the reason for this is we say Hadrat Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah radiyallahu anhu as an example. He is Abu Ubaidah or Amir ibn Abdullah. That's his Abu Ubaidah radiyallahu anhu's name. His real name is Amir, not Abu Ubaidah in the first place, but he's Amir ibn Abdullah. Amir is the son of Abdullah, and then you go up till you reach Al-Jarrah, who was a doctor, let's put it that way, hence the term Jarrah. But nonetheless, the point being that it is a common thing to say, I am the son of so-and-so. It means I'm from the offspring of so-and-so. Doesn't literally mean that this is your father, that you your grandfather's son. No. It means your own father's brother. You don't mean it that way. It's a common usage in Arabic to make a statement like this here, to say, I'm this. In fact, even in English, people say, let's put it this way. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam often referred to Hadrat Hassan and Hadrat Hussein radiyallahu anhuma as being, these are, Inna bani hadha sayyidun. With Hadrat Hassan radiyallahu anhu, the son of mine is a leader, and he will unite through two huge group of Muslims. The son of mine. What is a son? No, he was a grandson. So it's a common phrase used in Arabic to refer to your grandfather as your father, to refer to your grandson as your own, your grandfather as your father and your grandson as your own son. Hence why the Sayyids, the people who are related to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, 100 years, 400, 500 years go by and they call Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam their grandfather. There's like 20 people in their chain before they reach Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, but they say, my grandfather. Why? Because that's how it's used in Arabic for when you go 2 generations and then you're going all the way up. But anyway, that's for another time and place. Our time is almost out, so let's continue. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah is the narrator of this hadith once again. So once again, mules, donkeys, both of them are clean in the sense that you can make use of them to ride on them. Doesn't mean you go and eat out of one plate with them. حديث number 275 عن أنس رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يوم خيبر على حمار مختوم بحبل من leaf. Not leaf as in English word, but leaf, which means palm fiber. أخرجه عبد ibn Humayd, the Imam Abd ibn Humayd. Amongst the books of hadith, you have the kitab of Imam Abd ibn Humayd, as well as many other books of hadith that many people don't know about. They know about the 6 famous books of hadith, but that doesn't mean there's only 6 books of hadith. There's dozens of books of hadith. So Imam Abd ibn Humayd rahimahullah is the narrator of this hadith. وفي سنده مقال كذا في فتح الباري. Okay. Anyway, let me read first. Hadrat Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu anhu, he said that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam on the day of Khaybar was on a donkey, makhtoom. Makhtoom means it had a nose ring. Bihablin min leaf, with a rope through it, which was made out of palm fiber. So, like not exactly a nose ring per se, but where the reins, so to speak, of the animal was made out of palm fiber. But once again, purpose of quoting the hadith is to show that the Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam was riding on a donkey. So all the purpose of all of these things, we touched on the saliva of the donkey, we touched on the eating of onagers, we touched on the point of the body of the donkeys being pure and the meat of domesticated ones being impure, and obviously the fact that you can make use of them for the purpose that they are there, which is to be a beast of burden, as they are referred to, in the sense that you can pile things on them and you travel with them, like you would ride on your camel and your horse and things. You don't ride now on your cows. cows were not created. Inna lam nukhlaq lihada. As one cow spoke up to say that we were not created for this. Allah created them for plowing the fields and so on and so forth, such things, but not for you to turn them into your personal transport and start riding around on your cows. But anyway, so the whole purpose of quoting these last four narrations here, was to simply show that the donkey and a mule are creatures which are pure in that sense that you can ride on them, you can make use of them for this reason. If you want to make your own donkey cart and let them ride you around in that way, or you want to ride on the back of the animal, both ways are perfectly fine, but you don't turn it into your supper. You can have your donkey there for your fields and your transport and stuff, but there are limitations with regards to things. So you don't eat him. Like we said, you don't eat the horse for the purpose of not listening the horses when the time comes for jihad. But like we said the week before last, at least, when we touched on that point, that the ruling is not that horses are haram, but that it should, according to the Hanafi madhab, it's something that should not be eaten, so that it does not lead to a deficiency at the time of jihad. So, in order to reach a certain objective, this is required, then we have to protect and preserve this. If you're understanding what's being said, so you can't come now for jihad and there's no cavalry because you ate up all the horses. Then everybody's there on foot, and the army, opposing army, has got 1,000 horsemen, and they ride through you, chopping you down, and you can't fight back because you ate all your horses. So the army, the Muslim army, has to exist, and they need to have their mounts. So therefore, you don't eat the horses. You can go into battle on a donkey, but obviously no donkey can keep up with a horse on the battlefield. So donkeys used to be brought to the battle, sure, no doubt about it, as you could see on the day of Khaybar. So they were there, but Khaybar and these type of battles were sieging, there was sieges taking place against the Jews and stuff. It wasn't galloping through the battlefield on a donkey. It wasn't in that. Yes, sometimes you may be in a central place and you're fighting them off left, right, and center because you maybe didn't have a horse or whatever the case may be. But horses was the primary animal that used to be used as cavalry. You had your people that were on camels, those that were on horses, those that came on foot, those that, your archers, your people with spears, your people with shields and swords, those who used a big sword, those who used two swords. You had different people in different levels. So at the end of the day, point being that the horses are permissible if somebody happened to have, let's say a Shafi'i happened to have taken his horse and slaughtered it and cooked him there now, and he invited you around for supper and now you ate it. It's not a problem. It's not something which is haram. But we would say don't eat those horses, keep them for jihad. But where the donkeys are concerned, then they are not permissible to eat at all, as you could see from the previous ahadith. And this prohibition had taken place after the battle of Khaybar. Anyway, so he said that Imam Abd ibn Humayd rahimahullah is the narrator of this hadith. وفي سنده مقال, and there's some let's say some debate with regards to someone in the chain, but at the end of the day, it's not something which is coming isolated, because the previous ahadith from Bukhari all supports the same thing. So therefore, it's neither here nor there, because it's only adding to what we have already established, which is authentic. So even if you said the chain was very weak, fabricated, it still doesn't make any difference. You say, anyway, so there's mentioned that there's some mention about somebody in the chain, like it's mentioned in Fath al-Bari, but he's not getting into all of that right now. So he ends this chapter on this point here. And the next chapter starts with the permissibility of making wudu from nabidh of dates. But that we will do next time, inshallah ta'ala. For now, we will end on this point. Our time is already running short according to Zoom. So no point we start a chapter and then not have time to be able to explain what exactly is Nabi, and what are the rulings associated with it. So we'll stop on this point here. Until next time, we end and we say, وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد سبحان الله وبحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.